my name is Colleen, and this video is going to be some free resources to help people with some common New Year's type resolutions that people tend to make. They're all mental health related, so it's just basically going to be a bunch of different resources that you can find for free to help you with various mental health goals. And I've kind of snuck in there like book reviews. Side note, I got this sweater at Goodwill, and it may be the logo of our rival university. I teach at ASU, and I think this is the logo for University of Arizona, Tucson. My husband told me it was that. I had no idea when I bought it because I'm not from here. But it's pink, not red. So someone tell me, is this just a sweater with an A on it, or is this like a branded sweater? I don't know. I got it at Goodwill. Also, as a caveat, I am a professor. I'm an adjunct at Arizona State University. None of the opinions that I'm expressing here are like the express opinions of the university that I work for, so please don't give them any hate. This is just me making a YouTube video as a regular person. I have a mental health background. I have a license to practice therapy, but this isn't therapy. This is just regular tools that I use as a human being. So also, as a mental health therapist, of course, I have to plug therapy. Therapy is one of the best, if not the best thing that you could do for your mental health. However, as a therapist and as a person, I recognize that not everyone can get it. Not everyone has access to it. Depending on where you live, you might not have a lot of people around who can actually provide it for you, or maybe technology is unreliable, or maybe you don't have insurance. There's a lot of reasons why people might not seek out therapy. So this list is really intended not to replace therapy, not to be therapy, but just to be things that are free that you can do to increase your overall mental health, to like accomplish some goals that you might have. And also it could be an accompaniment to going to therapy. None of this stuff really should interfere with therapy that you're doing. I guess I can't speak for every therapist and every single client. First category, or like the first goal that I wanted to address, was I have a lot of people talk about like wanting to be more productive, wanting to make better use of their time. So I have a couple of tools in there. I know a lot of times people get distracted, especially some of us are still working from home. A lot of us are students. You have a lot of time on the computer no matter what you do. Even pre-pandemic, we had a lot of time on the computer, and now it's like way too much time. So one thing that I've really liked finding, there is an app for this, but you don't actually need to use an app. It's called the Pomodoro Technique. It's Pomodoro. It's Italian for tomato. So the guy who invented it, he was Italian. I do not remember his name. I guess I can find that somewhere. I did not invent this. So he had like a tomato-shaped timer, like a kitchen timer that you just like crank. And his technique was that he would break down tasks into 25-minute chunks. So instead of having like, let's say 3 hours that you have to like accomplish a work task, or maybe you're doing a batch of something, maybe you're boxing up orders because you deliver things. Instead of having it all in one big chunk, which is something that sometimes has people tend to procrastinate or to put things off, or to like, other things will encroach on your time. If you just have 25-minute chunks, you're more likely to be able to pay attention for that amount of time. And then you give yourself 5 minutes where you take a break, and you can set the timer for 25 minutes and 5 minutes. And there's actually apps that do it for you, which makes it a lot easier. This is good for, I would say it's pretty much good for anybody who has to do things where you're structuring your own time, especially if you're like a student. If you work and you have like project-based work where you're having to do like a task over time, and if you're prone to putting things off, if it's hard for you to get started, if you feel really overwhelmed, I found like for me, if I like billing is something I don't like to do as a therapist. I don't really mind writing case notes. A lot of people hate writing case notes. That's never been a problem for me. But I don't like billing. It's boring. And it's stressful because if you do it wrong, you might not get paid, or the insurance company is going to get mad at you or something. So I found using this technique for myself, it helps me just get started. And usually I overestimate how long something's going to take me to do. So I'll be like, oh, this is going to take me like 2 hours. But if I actually focus for 25 minutes, it might just take the 25 minutes and then maybe another set. So you call each set a Pomodoro if you're like a purist about the technique. The other thing I like about it is if you're someone who's prone to inattentiveness, or you just have a lot on your plate, you have a lot on your mind, what you should do is just have like a pad of paper, or you could have like your phone and the notes app on your phone next to you. If something enters your mind, and it's a distraction during those 25 minutes, just write it down. So we have a place for it. It's not going away. We're not forgetting about it, but we're not going to do it right now. And so then there, as part of this process, you like at the end of your, time period where you're doing your tasks, you can assign those their own unit of time. So like let's say that I realize I have to call the landlord because something's broken, like my garbage disposal is backed up or whatever. So maybe I just write that on my thing, on my list, and then I will make another Pomodoro for that of all the little tasks that I have instead of like getting up and doing it right away. So the idea is just actually having undivided attention for a couple of minutes at a time. This one's kind of related to the Pomodoro technique, but if you find that you have something that is really just like eating away at you, something I like to do, which is also completely free and you could do it pretty much anywhere, I call it a brain dump. I also did not invent this. This is a CBT technique. It helps me a lot, especially if I'm like up in the middle of the night, can't sleep, I'm worried about stuff. What you do, you just write down all the thoughts that are happening in your head at that moment. And most of us kind of have like a train track that those thoughts like to go on, where we kind of end up at the same location most of the time. So if you allow your anxiety to just keep riding the train, you're probably going to end up in the similar place as you normally do when you have anxious thoughts. So for example, somebody might be worried that they said something wrong to a friend, and then if they kind of let themselves go with those anxious thoughts, then they end up at the like the end station of nobody likes me, I don't have any friends, right? Sometimes just the act of writing out all the thoughts that are happening in your head, it can fatigue you enough that you relax, or it can, expel those in a way where you can feel like you've expressed it enough that you calm down a little bit. It's likely that you'll still feel agitated, so there's a second step that you can take with it. And you can also pair this with like a breathing exercise or something. My experience is that a lot of people, including myself, sometimes feel way too anxious to just start with like a breathing exercise. They actually have to do something first. You might be the opposite. You might want to start with doing something that's somatic, like tensing and untensing your muscles, and then you do a brain dump. You just figure out what works for you. Step you can do with that is, let's say you have your list of all the things that are on your mind, all the things that are bothering you. So maybe my list has like, I need to save more money, and I had an argument with my friend, and I'm not doing well enough at my job, or like I've unread emails, and all these things, right? Okay, so go through there, each item that you have on that list, and just kind of embody the spirit of like a kind and compassionate friend, or maybe you have like a relative that you can kind of think of, just like somebody in your life who would be nice to you. And if you can't think of anybody, just imagine what that might be like. It could be a character you saw on TV, it could be like an imaginary person, somebody in a book, whatever. It doesn't have to be a real person if that's not accessible to you, but just imagine what they might say, right? So let's say the thing on my list is I have no friends. My imaginary compassionate person might say, do you really have no friends? I think you have a couple of friends in your phone. Who called you last week to ask how you were doing, right? So giving yourself kind of that space where you're arguing with yourself, but in like a positive way, where you can find evidence that is contrary to a negative belief, or just giving yourself something compassionate to say, like maybe you feel like you're a failure because you actually did fail at something. And then the compassionate part of yourself can say, yeah, everybody fails all the time. The most important thing is that you get back up again. Whatever it is just something that actually feels soothing to you. Is if you like journaling and you actually keep it, and you like keep the things that you wrote, you might find that over time some of your negativity changes, or you're having less negative thoughts in general. And that's just a positive thing, to be able to see growth over time. Or you can see that your negative thoughts have changed, which sometimes is a nice fact check for people, because they think that like the situation that they're in will never end, and then they clearly see that like, oh, 6 months ago I thought that would never end, and it totally did. Another bonus one here that's really just a book review, The Smart But Scattered Guide to Success. It's by Peg Dawson and Colin Guare. It's Guare. It's meant for adults with ADHD. However, I think it's a good book for basically anybody to read. It's just like ways for organizing productivity, ways for giving yourself breaks, A lot of people struggle with inattentiveness, whether or not it's diagnosed as ADHD. And some people have ADHD or ADD, but it's not diagnosed because diagnosis is a whole process. So, just in general, a good book if you struggle with productivity or you feel like you're, losing things all the time. It's a really kind way of giving people tips because I find a lot of times when people struggle with like inattentiveness or being disorganized that they do a lot of self-blame on there, and so this book is good in that way. There's a whole series they have about smart but scattered. Some are for teens, some are for kids. This one is particularly for adults. While we're talking about books, I have discovered this app called Overdrive. It is basically like the library on your phone, which is really cool because you can get connected up to a local library that you're not local to. Um, when I lived in Minneapolis, I used to connect it up to the Minneapolis Central Library, and then I would look for their titles because it was this huge, huge library. But getting there was a huge pain because it was in downtown. So you can get audiobooks on there too, which is nice if you want an alternative to Audible, if you don't like Amazon or you just want them for free. The one downside is that it has to be a book that the library has. So sometimes if you're trying to read a book that everybody wants to read, or if you're trying to read a book that's by an obscure author or something that is maybe like self-published or, just not very common, it's a little hard to find all the books you want. I remember when I was reading all the Game of Thrones books that there was like 35 reservations before mine on those books on Overdrive. So I was just like, yeah, I'm going to buy the book. So it won't work for everything. However, it's a really good way if you want to read more, if you want to like get into listening to audiobooks, but you don't want to support Audible or you don't want to pay the money. I really, really like it. I think you are limited by the library that you have a card with. So like for example, I live in Phoenix and I have a library card at the Phoenix Library. I don't think that I can like get books from Massachusetts or something. So that is another downfall, but if you're in like a big library system, you should be able to get a lot of books. So here's the part now where it's a mini book review video. I just wanted to really quickly mention some books that I have enjoyed, that I've read in like the past few months, or actually one of these that I'm in the middle of reading right now. So, Posthumous Memoirs of Cubas. It's by Joaquim Machado de Assis. It's a book that's set in like colonial Brazil. It's how do I describe this? So basically the guy who wrote it, the main character, it's fiction. He's telling you about his life, but he's from beyond the grave. And it's not like a spooky ghost story. It's just like it's like a memoir, but the guy is a jerk and he's a loser and it's really funny. It's very like existential. It's like it sounds like a boring read, but it's not. Basically, he spends his whole life just kind of doing nothing and being a rich person and like wasting his life away. But it's really like quirkily written and really interesting. And I was so pumped to like read something that made me laugh. It's hard for me to find stuff that I find genuinely funny. So I like I went on Powell's. Powell's is a bookstore in Portland that's really, really big, but they deliver to everywhere. And like if you can't find books on Amazon or you don't want to shop on Amazon, they have everything. Like the actual bookstore is like 3 city blocks. It's massive. So I made a huge order on Powell's to like buy a bunch of his books. So it's set in like the mid 1800s. I think the guy Brás Cubas, the main character, he's like a nobleman in Rio de Janeiro, and he was born in like 1811 and then he dies in like 1860 or 70 or something. So he takes you through his whole life. So it's pretty interesting. I liked it a lot. It's good for like kind of learning more about Brazilian history. And he apparently, so part of the book, this isn't really a spoiler, part of the book, he has this friend named Quincas Borba who is a philosopher, but he's like not well. Like he's like deluded. He is, I don't know what's a PC way of saying it, but he's not well. He's not mentally well. Okay. So at first, Brás Cubas thinks that Quincas Borba is just like a really brilliant philosopher. But the first time he meets him, since the two grew up together as like kids, right? And then Brás Cubas runs into Quincas Borba, and Quincas Borba is like in rags, like he's been ruined financially. And Cubas is a nobleman. He doesn't really work, but he has family wealth, so he tries to offer the guy a job, and he's like, never, I would never work. I like, and he gets really mad, and then he steals his watch. And then like years later, Quincas Borba runs into some family wealth, like some inheritance, and he talks about how he has this philosophy, and then the two of them just spend a lot of time together, and then one day Cubas realizes that Quincas Borba is like not okay, like that his philosophy is actually just like utter nonsense, because he starts making up this like really elaborate dance. It's really funny, and there is a sequel book called Quincas Borba that I really want to read. Apparently it's about Quincas Borba being in a mental institution, and then one of the like staff at the institution decides to follow his philosophy, and he also has a dog, and the dog is named Quincas Borba. I don't know why, I just think that's really funny, and I really want to have a dog and name it Quincas Borba. I don't really feel like that's a spoiler because that book is incredibly hard to find. So maybe I'll do a review on all my Machado de Assis books, because I got like 10 books by him. I'd never heard of him before. My husband is from Brazil, and he told me about it. I think in Brazil he's commonly read because he's sort of like their Mark Twain. Which Mark Twain, by the way, is really funny. If you've never read Mark Twain, you should. He's really funny. It's not like a lot of American classic literature I do not like is like very boring, like Thoreau. No. But Mark Twain is funny. So Machado de Assis is kind of like the same vein. Of course, caveat with this book, like any book that is, over 50 years old, there's like sexist and racist things in it. He's a slave owner, the guy, Cubas. In Brazil at that time, slaves could like earn their way to freedom. So there actually are some like interesting excerpts about like he had a slave, and then later that slave had a slave, and he was like remarking on the way that he was behaving towards his own slaves. So yeah, that's there. Like that's in there. Machado de Assis was actually like the grandson of freed slaves. So it's complicated. Brazil's different than the US. And then the way he describes women is, objectifying. However, it doesn't, me as a woman, like, I sometimes get really bothered by that when, like, men write women characters as very, like, sexualized. But in this book, it's like the author kind of comes out and he's just like, I'm a piece of shit. Like, he's, like, not a good person. He doesn't pretend to be. So it bothers me a lot less, I guess. So another book that I would recommend, that I'm pretty sure most people will be able to find on Overdrive, is Dune. So it's by Frank Herbert, Herbert, and I'll list that in the description box. So the movie just came out. My opinion, I really liked it. I love the Dune series. I've only really liked up until God Emperor of Dune. I know some people think that that's heretical. There's a book called Heretics of Dune too. It's a joke. So that's, I'm not like the most hardcore Dune person, but I have loved Dune for like 15 years. It's a good book. I'd say the reading level, you probably want to be at least like 15 to read it. I know some kids read it. It just might be a little dense. It is legit like 900 pages long. So audiobook, I think, is a good way to go, unless you really love reading super long books. So that one, the movie will make a lot more sense if you read the book. And if you like fantasy and you just never got around to doing Dune, do it now. It's good. I liked it. I could do a whole separate video about why I like Dune and high fantasy and things like that. But the main point is I liked that there was sort of an anti-hero. And that is throughout the books, at least the ones I've read, which is only 3 of them. There's like an anti-hero. So the beginning, the story it follows what seems to be sort of like a messiah story, but then you see very quickly that it's much more nuanced than that. There's a lot of like sort of planetary ecology things mixed in with there. I personally really thought it was cool because I grew up in Minnesota where there are a lot of lakes, and then I moved here to the desert, and I felt sort of like I was moving from Caladan to Arrakis. But the author did a ton of research. I mean, like Tolkien level, like really, really good world building. He did a lot of research about various like tribes that live in deserts, and so a lot of the people who live in the deserts, they're called Fremen. A lot of their cultural aspects and even their words are based off of like Arabic or like Bedouin traditions. But he does it in like an interesting and not like a super. I mean, I guess somebody who's from this culture could chime in on this better than me too, but it seems to me like it's done in a way that's not weirdly voyeuristic or like Orientalism. It's like just taking aspects of the culture and like using that in fantasy. And I do feel like a lot, like almost all fantasy that I've ever read is somehow based in England or like some England version of the world. And that's kind of boring. Like, why can't we have, you know, like you have Game of Thrones, Middle Earth, that's England. That's all England. It's like, can we have fantasy that's somewhere else that's like based in a world or an alternate reality that's like not just like one country in Europe? So it's cool. It's cool that they kind of like explore the different religions and they explore like how religious elements are like shape a culture. It's just very interesting from like an anthropological standpoint, but also just a good story, super super interesting. And if you love to just like deep dive into like a fantasy world, there's a lot there for you. Okay, so those are two fiction books that I would recommend if you're looking on Overdrive. A couple of therapy related / nonfiction books. I am working on, I'm actually reading it right now. I have a text of it. It's The 7 Principles for Making Marriage Work. It's by John Gottman and Nan Silver. The reason I have a text version, or let me see if I can find it. There are like quizzes that are in here, which is kind of a bummer to listen to if you're reading the Audible or like the audiobook, because it'll be like they have, look, this is my favorite. This is when I was like, I need to buy the text of the book. On page 80, they give you a list of what I really cherish about my partner is that she or he, and yeah, they don't have gender non-binary stuff because this was written a while ago. But they have like a list of adjectives, and then they just read them in the audio, and you're like, they're like discriminating, dynamic, eager, easygoing, and I was like fast forwarding. I was like, okay. So it is probably a good idea to get the text version if you want to do the quizzes and things in there, but I have enjoyed this. It has practical tips, and John Gottman is, I'm not a couples therapist, but he is one that's pretty well known in the field. He also gives like very easy to follow instructions, and he's evidence-based, by which I mean he actually did research on couples, and I think they still do research on couples in Seattle and Washington. I think it's University of Washington. They still research couples, and they like look at their interactions, and then they code the ways that people interact with one another and see like what is more likely to lead to long-term relationship success. So if you're skeptical about therapy, about marriage therapy, start with this. This has like real science behind it. There, it's in the window. It has real science behind it, and I think it's very readable and easy to follow. So here's another one. I actually have this one in text also, because when I find books I really like, a lot of times I'll listen to them like an Audible or on Overdrive, and then if I like it, I want to have the paper one so I can show clients or people in my life. I've actually bought more than one copy of this book and given it to people. So yeah, it's called Adult Children of Emotionally Immature Parents by Lindsay Gibson, which I don't love the title. I feel like the title's kind of vilifying parents, but basically what it is I think a lot of books are really focused on like, this is what was wrong with your childhood and this is how to fix it. This is just like, okay, whatever happened in your life with your parents was just somehow not quite enough what you needed. We're not going to spend tons of time talking about what happened with your parents or why your parents are bad, or trying to categorize like your parents as bad or good, or trying to decide what disorder they have, because that's just sort of like, that's more focused on them than you. It's more like, so how have the childhood experiences that you've had shaped the way that you approach relationships now, and how do you fill in those gaps? And I like it's just like very practically based. It's not so much like introspective and psychological, philosophical, because most people don't want to spend a lot of time just being like, does my parent have this disorder or this disorder? Because it's like sometimes useful to know that, but also more useful to be like, well, I can't sleep through tonight because I have this much anxiety. How do I deal with my anxiety? You see what I'm saying? I am that type of therapist more so. So yeah, this one I like. The entire second half of the book, I don't care what you feel like about your parents. If your parents were like the best people in the entire world, you could still benefit from this book, because this is like, look at this. How to identify, there we go, emotionally mature people. Tell me, like, like everyone could use that. Everybody in the entire world could use that. So it's like how to set boundaries with people, how to stay away from people who have like problematic traits or how to deal with them. And even if you have pretty good relationships, even if your parents and you get along awesome, there's still going to be people in your life that like don't know how to do boundaries, or they're just mean, like especially at work or just in your extended family. So I love this book for that. That is my favorite thing. And it just has really practical advice on how to set boundaries in a way that's like sustainable for you, like telling the person what you're going to do, not telling them what they need to do. So I love that one. So the last book in my mini book review portion here is Trauma Stewardship by Laura Van Dernoot Lipsky. So that's VAN space DERNOOT space LIPSKY. So this is basically like, I wish every coworker I ever had read this book. And it doesn't just apply to people who work in the mental health professions, although it's definitely good if you do. It's basically like, how do we deal with the emotions of other people? How do we have space for ourselves? In like, you know, you have a workplace where you do something that's difficult every day. Maybe you're not a therapist, maybe you're like a paramedic, or maybe you're a surgeon, or maybe you're a scientist and you just have a lot of pressure on you, but you also have to deal with like the emotional reactivity of other people. By the way, you have to do that in every job, not just like mental health jobs. So it really talks about like, how do we handle the trauma of other people? How do we handle other people's emotional reactivity while still like having space for our own feelings and being respectful of that? And it's just like very practical ways of dealing with your own stuff and having space for other people who have stuff. I guess that's the long and short of that. What I really like about it is that it doesn't just talk about frontline clinical staff, because if you're a manager of any kind of people, I don't even care, like I don't care if you work at like a factory, you have to manage people as like entire human beings with emotions and experiences. And sometimes one of your employees, maybe like their dad dies, or they're going through a divorce, or they're homeless or something, and you have to be able to like have, you know, handle the stress that you have in your life and the things that go on with you, while still having space for that person and being compassionate, but having limits on like what you're going to do or not do for them. So it's again like along the theme of like boundary setting and dealing with other people, but I just feel like good practical advice, and not just for mental health professionals. So another topic that I have on here is just learning about mental health, or learning about therapy, or, you know, like having things that you watch on YouTube be therapy related in some way. So I just have some YouTube accounts that I really like. Number one is Mickey Atkins. I'm going to have her linked in the thing below. So Mickey went to ASU. She is in Tucson. She has a lot of videos that are like reaction videos to TV shows, or I really like, she has a series of videos that are in like therapy FAQs, like how to find a therapist, how to know if your therapist is a good fit, how to talk about money, things like that. I was like thinking about making those videos, and I'm like, why? I would just link to hers. They're better. They're good. And she's also in Arizona already, so it's like applicable. So yeah, I like her stuff. She's very funny. She's very down to earth. She's just like fun to listen to, and covers a wide range of topics. I also like Patrick Teahan. I think he's in Massachusetts. So what he does is a lot of like inner child stuff. He talks about dealing with trauma, dealing with family members who have problematic behaviors. He also does like these reenactments, which I really think are, I don't think, they're not supposed to be funny, but they're kind of funny just like in principle. It's like, you know how Eddie Murphy, like in The Nutty Professor, was like every person at the table? Like he does that. But he doesn't like wear different costumes. It's just that he films in such a way where he's having a conversation, like to show you like how a conversation might happen with a family member that's problematic, and then how you can change it. So his filming is good. I'm like, you know, credit where credit's due. I like the way he films. He also gives, again, what have I said like a million times, practical advice, actual stuff that you can do about calming your inner child, like reading yourself a story before bed, or like having a comforting object like a teddy bear. Yeah, these things sound dumb, but a lot of times when people have trauma in early childhood, they really struggle to sleep, or they struggle to stay asleep. or just feel safe. And so, addressing those really core needs, awesome. I haven't found a lot of people who take that approach on YouTube, so he's special. I like him. I also like Cinema Therapy. That's just like kind of like a fun channel. They pick apart movies. The best ones are the ones where they talk about Twilight, because Twilight, of course, is just a buffet of problematic relationships. But I really like it for the sort of non-toxic masculinity aspect. Like they're two guys. They're, I don't know, maybe in their 40s or 50s, and they like talk to each other, and sometimes the movies make them cry, and then they just cry. They talk about being dads. I really appreciated that aspect of it. And another one is Psychology in Seattle, although I feel like everybody's heard of him, so he's more well-known. He talks about a lot of different topics, and a lot of his stuff is 90 Day Fiancé related, which I love 90 Day Fiancé. However, I'm sure a lot of people have probably already mentioned him, so I'm not going to go in depth about him. So the last category is just things for better sleep. This is something I'm personally trying to work on. I just downloaded an app called Sleep by Wysa. It's Wysa. Again, I have no idea if this will still be around or still be free if you watch this video later. So I would just recommend going to your Play Store and looking for like storytelling apps or like sleep stories, or I think they have them on the Calm app, but they might cost money. You can also, if you have an Audible subscription, you can play a book and have a timer on it so that it turns off after like 45 minutes so you don't like listen to the whole book. That's something I used to do, but I like this app better because it's specifically for sleep. One of my sleep tricks was to like get an audiobook that was like not in English, so it's just like someone making sounds and I can't really understand it, and then it was really relaxing. And I chose like Don Quixote because it's extremely long and I don't speak Spanish, so like I never run out of book. So you could do that, or you could just get the sleep app. There's the sleep stories are usually designed so like you relax, like they might have muscle relaxation embedded in the story where they're like telling you to like notice your relaxation or notice that your eyelids are heavy or whatever, and that helps. I'd also recommend going in your phone settings and like looking at the blue light, what do they call it? They have like sleep timers on there, so like you can put in your settings. I would look, it's usually under the display tab. You can go in there and then like at 8:30 p.m. it will switch so the light kind of changes, and that's supposed to be good for you. I'm not a scientist. I don't really research that, but it's for me when I notice that the light changes, that's also kind of my cue. I'm like, okay, I need to be like not on not on this anymore. I need to get off. You can get apps that are a timer that will like turn your phone off or like make it be like emergency only or something after a certain time so you're like not using it as much. Or you can put them on, like Instagram has a thing that will tell you how many minutes you've been on it per day if you want to limit that. So there's a whole slew of stuff like that. But as far as sleep is concerned, I would say just change the display. I also enjoy, there's a mood tracker that I started using. And mood trackers kind of come and go. Like there were some that I really liked and I recommended them to clients, and then like 3 months later they were gone. So this one I like. I don't know if it's still going to be around in 6 months. It's called Finch, and it's really, really ridiculously adorable. It's like a little bird. And I named mine Pinga, because on Pingu, like the penguin, like the claymation penguin, he has a little sister named Pinga, and she's a baby. And this little thing looks like Pinga. It's so cute. It's kind of like a Tamagotchi. So it's a mood tracker, like it asks you your mood, but instead of just being the app, it's like this cute little bird, and it's adorable. So I love it. And it gives you like an option to set goals for the day, and they're like really easy, but you can kind of go out of your comfort zone with them. Like sometimes they'll have goals around like tell a friend that you're grateful or things like that. You can pick, and sometimes if you don't want to have a goal that's very hard, you can just say like get out of bed. So I like that because it's not terribly pushy as a mood tracker. It doesn't have excessive notifications, and it's adorable. All right, well, this was a really long video, and I'm really long-winded. So if you're still here, have a great day, and happy 2022. Hope it's better than 2021. Cross your fingers. Bye.